Hey everyone, thank you for checking out Today Matters. I'm Pastor Jason Sneddon, and I'm really excited to be here talking about Psalm 17, 1 through 5 today. Psalm 17 in its entirety is a prayer of King David, and it reads like this. Hear me, Lord, my plea is just. Listen to me cry. Hear my prayer does not rise from deceitful lips. Let my vindication come from you. May your eyes see what is right. Though you probe my heart, though you examine me at night and test me, you will find that I have planned no evil. My mouth has not transgressed. Though people try to bribe me, I have kept myself from the ways of the violent through what your lips have commanded. My steps have held to your paths. My feet have not stumbled. Now those are words that mark a man with the utmost of trust in God. David completely removed his own confidence, and instead, he made clear his heavenly hope. In this very section of Scripture, he was appealing to God based on the justice or merit of the cause itself. And David believed that God would hear his cry because this was a just cause. And notice that King David was being really careful about speaking honestly when he asked God to hear his prayer, and that it wasn't in a deceitful manner. He was trying to convey that he didn't deserve what was going on because he didn't hold back any of the facts whatsoever. And he further allowed God to take the lead in vindicating him because of his trust in God. In fact, David clearly had opportunities to make things right himself, but in an abundance of caution, he cries out for God's will in this situation. Now, the situation itself was more than likely regarding David being hunted by Saul, so it was most definitely a dire circumstance. Now, what if we ourselves, what if we took a step back and prayed like that? What if we examined our situation and allowed God to step in and take control? We should also be examining ourselves so we're presenting to God in the correct light. The light that he is actually already aware of. The thing is, sometimes we are the offender rather than the offended. So we have to ask ourselves questions in times like this. Things like, am I being selfish? Is there something that I neglected? Should I correct a wrong by making it right? Where are my priorities? The thing is, when we don't take into consideration all of the facts and we're self-concerned, our prayers are most likely fruitless. But if our true heart leads us in our prayers and our conversations with God, then I believe with all certainty that God will favor them. Notice that very first verse tells us that David was crying out to God. How often do we do that? Usually it's some sort of an ER 911 prayer at the last minute when all other efforts have failed. Efforts that we took solely upon ourselves as if we had all the power to do it. So think about how much you pray, how often you pray. And that's not in an effort to make you feel guilty, but it's a good question to ask. There's no set time and there's no number of prayers that are right, but we could be missing out on the power and wisdom that comes from praying. God has a plan in all of our lives. God had a plan for King David's life, and what ultimately happened is that David's prayers furthered God's plan. David's prayers made God's plan move forward. Now, quite honestly, from an outsider looking in, David's life was an absolute wreck. And we can conclude this based on the veracity and amount of prayers from David that we find in the Bible. However, I think it brings more clarity that even though his life seemed like it was a mess, he had it quite together based on how much of his life he was taking to God. When we take our concerns and our needs, our weaknesses to God, he visits us with power and wisdom. And that is exactly what David was able to experience in his life. When God knows that we truly depend on him for our forgiveness and for our supplication, he can make our burden lighter. And through this, just like David, gratitude and security can be found, which can only help us grow. Keep this in mind. Prayer is simply a conversation between you and God. There's no special old English accent or lingo that needs to be used. He meets us where we are, with what we have, and with what we're dealing with. So let me leave you with this. Learn to be thankful, even in trials. Be grateful, having an attitude of gratitude. Know that God is in absolute control. He knows what we don't. God causes all things to work together for the good of those that love him. And even if our prayers aren't being answered in the way or the timing that we want, he remains our provider and our waymaker. Love you guys, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Today Matters.